Now it's time for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Inevitably, Africa's 001 is not here, but I can assure you she'll be back in no time. But we have Yolanda here to spearhead the newspaper headlines. We have a lot in the offing. Trust Yolanda.
Yeah, we have a lot. The way you said she's not here, but we have Yolanda. Good morning, Benga. How are you?
Indeed, good morning.
I hope you had a wonderful weekend.
Experience. Well, sure we did. It's always good to come back here refreshed and ready to blaze the headlines.
Absolutely. So let's look at what's in the newspapers today. Starting with our sister publication this day, if we can pull that up. On the front page, we have Adamawa's Fintiri set to join APC, making 30 states a grand reception for Kano governor today. I think, Benga, when you saw that, you kind of had a shock with that, but we'll come back to it and break it down a little later. Next up, we have the Punch. If we can put up the Punch, we have the emergency plenary session. National Assembly has moved to shift a presidential poll to February the 13th. The Senate has recalled the lawmakers from recess again, as well to review the 2026 electoral bill. Again, that's tomorrow on Tuesday. Presidential poll to hold earlier over Ramadan overlap. Still in the Punch, we have a little bit of photojournalism there with the sad report that we held earlier with the fire outbreak in the market in Kano. The rider says Shatima leads FG delegation to Kano after devastating market fire. If you will well remember, the VP just returned back to the country from Ethiopia, and so now I think this is being prioritized right now, this Kano this fire that has occurred in Kano at the market there. Moving on, we are looking at the Vanguard, where on the front we also have a bit of the same report that we saw earlier, Electoral Act harmonization. Reps under pressure to abandon compulsory e-transmission of results. Now, empirical data guided our decision, says the Senate, and insists that real-time electronic transmission of election results are not practical for now. Very interesting there. In the bottom right, we have a 2027 Obi formally declares for ADC, vows to defy ballot rigging. And also in Vanguard, a story that we're going to break down a little bit later, bottom left-hand corner, El-Rufai Ribadu bicker over alleged importation of poisonous substance. Moving on to The Guardian, we have that port users pay more as NCS's recreates multiple FX regime and adds a 7% margin. The NCS has left the exchange rate for assessing tariffs and other charges at 1,451.6 naira to the dollar, a band that is 98.8 naira above the spot rate and nearly 100 naira premium on the weekly average official rate. Also in The Guardian, AU Summit, Nigeria backs reforms and regional security measures. Still in The Guardian as well, I'd like to see the Afenifere raises alarm over persistent terror attack abductions in the nation. Moving on to the international headlines, let's take an African story on the Daily Graphic, in Ghana, where it says no more foreign funds for cocoa. No minerals will be exported without processing. That was a quote from President Mahama. Moving on to the International Guardian, we see on the front page, gold medals at the double on Super Olympic Sunday. Now, throughout the international papers, we see a lot of the, fanfare, especially in the British media on these Olympic, on this Olympic win, as it's their second gold medal. But let's come back to the local headlines and take a look at our Nigerian papers, kicking off this segment with This Day. Now, making news front and center is a political alignment, as Fintiri of Adamawa State is set to join the All Progressives Congress, making 30. A grand reception for the governor is to be held today. Benga, what do you make of this landslide realignments? Do you think they are a reflection of what is to come?
Yeah, I think the APC-led government, led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has been very consistent in its bid to clear every possible controversy and to reap all the spots on its way to clinching a second-term bid for presidency. And we've said here that he's an extremely skillful politician. You cannot take that away from him. And now he won without being in government. Now he has all the support of the government structure. And now, what does the defection of an Adamawa governor mean to in Nigeria's political landscape? We can see a governor that is about rounding up his second term. So we'll be wondering, was that a race for political survival? Was that a reign to gain, or was that a bargain to still retain the control of the political structure in a state? So many questions begging for answer. But again, what does this mean for the vice president that Adamawa State has always been his stronghold? You know that he moved to ADC some time ago, and Umar Fintiri still remained in the PDP. So now, Adamawa State is a state that controls over about 2 million registered voters. That means a lot and it's the 5th state that has the highest voting population. So if anyone says that this means taking away the wind from Atiku's sail,
right,
is very much in point. So you could imagine what would be happening for Atiku defecting from a party that has sunk so low into political uncertainty, now trying to find its way with a new party, and all of a sudden, the political backup, the political structure you control as your own constituency is moving away. But again, that is still largely within the realm of speculation, because some source has it that when he was spoken to, he denied it and he said that he is after the welfare of the people of Adamawa State. But the writings on the wall is strongly indicating that we might be saying such move as we have seen against his political, because what it means that now he would have a firmer control. He would not be under any political godfather. That alone is a very attractive carrot for him, politically speaking.
Well, let's stick to still what's happening in politics. You know, in the Punch, one of the top headlines that's there in the middle of the page is that there's an emergency plenary that's meant to be scheduled for tomorrow, Tuesday, the 17th of February, where the National Assembly has moved to shift the presidential poll to the 13th of February. Now, lawmakers have been recalled from their recess again, and the report says that the electoral bill will be revised again. Menga, give us your analysis on this.
Yeah, for one would wonder if the Senate is buying time to fix this, because I think this demands a lot of urgency, more than the approach I've seen so far. Waiting and fixing. What happens to Monday? Is it forbidden? So now the fly in the ointment seems to be Section 60, subsection 3, the issue of the real-time electronic transmission of results, real-time, which the House of Representatives have passed unconditionally. And that is the wish of majority of Nigerians.
Right.
Nigerians have come out on the streets. We've had civil society organizations. We've had the Nigerian labor demanding unconditional and mandatory adoption of real-time electronic transmission.
So do you think this pressure that we've been seeing from last week with all of these protests is actually starting to influence this actual decision to have this emergency meeting
I'm not
tomorrow?
sure, because I think there is a perceived threat on the political survival of a group. So, and that is where the conflict persists. Now, someone who perceives that once there's a real-time transmission of electronic result, that might undermine his political future, will not be in support. But every true Nigerian, let's be true to ourselves, this method was adopted in Osun election.
Yes.
It was adopted in the National Assembly election. And when you talk about risk, everything in life has its collateral risk. Yesterday, we saw a fire explosion in Kano. I know we'll come to that. I just use that to buttress. Does that mean that people will not trade again? Does that mean that there would not be mega malls or stores again? Does that mean that will put an end to mega investment in Nigeria? So I think it's a negative logic. And at best, we've been saying that there's a democratic crisis in Africa. And this is one of those things. I think it is shifting from the military boots on the ground coup that we've seen to parliamentary coup. The senator did a lot of efforts to try to explain in his long defense of that the option of electronic transmission of results, that the Senate is saying is adopting the real-time transmission, uploading from the from EC8A to the IRF portal. But that's what Nigerians are saying, and which they have not reacted to, is that discretionary powers given to INEC is what Nigerians are saying they do not want.
Yes,
because that was what stood in the way of transparency. And they went as far as the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says that it will not tamper with the law except that the parliament changes it to a mandatory, real-time, unconditional electronic transmission of results.
Well, I think we're going to analyze this a lot more when we hear the updates from what happens from that emergency plenary.
Indeed.
But you brought up a very interesting story, which I want to take next. It's a very sad and tragic one. Also in the Punch, where we have some photojournalism with the fire that broke out in Kano State. Now, the writer on the newspaper says that the vice president leads a delegation to Kano following the devastating tragedy. Now, as we know, the VP has just returned from Addis, where I mentioned earlier, where he was representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the African Union. Now, going into this report with the visuals that we're seeing on screen right now, about 7 people have been declared missing following a fire incident at the popular Singer Market in Kano, leaving goods worth over 5 billion naira destroyed. That's a lot of money. Now, the fire affected about 1,500 shops, including containers and makeshift stalls that were used by small-scale traders. President Bola Tinubu has commiserated with traders and people of Kano State over the devastating outbreak at the market that occurred over the weekend. Now, a statement was put up by Bayo Onanuga, special advisor to the president, saying that the president had reached out to the Kano State governor to obtain a situation report on the incident and all the details of what had happened. Now, as very tragic as it is, another fire outbreak, this is in the space of 2 weeks. I believe there was another fire outbreak as well in this same market. We have seen one too many reports of fire outbreaks, not just in this market, but in various markets across the country. What exactly is going on? Is this a case of negligence? I know part of what was said was that there was an electrical fault, but why do these incidents keep reoccurring in marketplaces? Is it poor planning? What is it exactly?
Okay, now, what has happened is an attack on Nigeria's proud history. Kano State is a commercial nerve center to the ancient trans-Saharan trade routes to North Africa, to the outside world, to Europe. And when you look at the Kano environment, the Kano State is a completely cosmopolitan region that has attracted people from different parts of the world, especially different parts of Nigeria. That's what a lot of people still don't know, that this fire explosion in that Kano Singer market, there are a lot of Igbo traders, there are a lot of Yoruba traders, there are a lot of Igbo people that have not even visited their ancestral home in several years ago. So I think that such a monument should be preserved. Now, it's 5 billion naira is not a child's play. It's not a stroll in the park.
1,500 shops.
And 1,500 shops. So if you look at it, it's a major blow to Kano trading culture.
Absolutely.
Kano has had this boisterous, this lucrative, prosperous trade over the years, over the centuries. And now, because of what we've seen, and by now, in any case, there should have been a preliminary report But what we are getting from the government is sympathy. The president sympathizes with this and that. I think it's not justiciable enough. We need to see more concrete action that shows that a preliminary report that will prevent a recurrence of such tragedy in future. But I don't think that this is really sad.
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of people will understand the history of Kano as the strongest commercial link to the outside world in those days of trans-Saharan trade would know what this means to an average investor in that mall.
Very true, and very sad, very tragic. You know, when we were taking the report earlier and we were watching and going through the footage, it was just very sad to behold that this keeps reoccurring over and over again.
Indeed.
And we need to look at what are the causes of these fires and why they keep coming up. And we need to also bring about solutions that are, you know, tapered to our climate, to the way where we live. You know, many people don't know that there's actually a fire season, which is the dry season. Things easily catch on fire during the dry season, so you have to, you know, really be careful when it comes to that time of year. And so just, you know, just to boost on what you had said, it's just very tragic. Kano especially being so pivotal in the nation and all of that. It's just a very sad thing that we're still having fire outbreaks that are caused by electrical faults. One would think that because there's so many people in such a confined space that we would be more careful with how we, you know, put our electricity lines and poles and all of that. Just very sad. Moving on to the Vanguard, let's take another story that I believe we looked at earlier on. It was on the left bottom corner there, the presidency that had tackled El-Rufai over the procurement of a toxic chemical substance that is also a known poison, thallium sulfate. Now, Nasir El-Rufai had asked the Office of the National Security Advisor to clarify what he describes as information available to opposition figures regarding the alleged procurement of a toxic chemical substance. In a letter dated January the 30th, 2026, and addressed to the National Security Advisor in Abuja, El-Rufai said he was seeking clarification and reassurance over reports that the office planned to obtain thallium sulfate from abroad. He posted a copy of the letter on his official X handle yesterday on Sunday. Now, the presidency, however, tackled the former governor, adding that he knew there was no government procurement or importation of thallium sulfate into Nigeria from Poland through the Office of the National Security Advisor. Benga, Nasir El-Rufai has dominated these past few days with the ambush at the airport and now this. What do you make of all these issues associated with El-Rufai, his person, his political standing? What does all of this say?
I know if you had your way, you wouldn't have touched this story.
Absolutely right.
That's the fait accompli of journalists.
Yes.
Anyway, I think this is really touching the raw nerve of government.
Yes.
And, because, you know, security information is not something that you would want to conveniently run on the front pages of the headlines of news. It's a very serious matter. And indeed, he has really brought this issue into the front burner of the civic and public space. And now the presidency has also swiftly responded by saying that this is just an attempt by Malam El-Rufai to play to the gallery and to draw sympathy and attention rather than facing what he was reportedly indicted for, the 423 billion naira Kano State scandal.
Right.
So now, looking at the response of the presidency, it says there is no plan by the government to procure such thallium sulfate.
Yes.
Through the Office of the National Security Advisor. Does that suggest that perhaps it might be through other channel? Because I think they should have just ended it by saying that there is no plan by the government to procure thallium sulfate. But now it appears, it gives that impression of being clever by half when it says through the Office of the National Security Advisor. So I think that is a very sensitive topic. He's expected to meet with the EFCC by 10 a.m. this morning, and Arise News is set to bring live feeds of that proceedings, of what comes out of that interaction between Malam El-Rufai and besides that too, don't forget that he said that someone also tapped into the phone of the national, which is also another security breach. So I think that more than ever, I think that there's a lot of questions to answer. We'll be keeping tab to see how that unfolds.
Absolutely. Part of that story that was quite interesting to me was when the presidency responded by saying that this was him being mischievous. So, you know, I wonder how all of that comes into play. And just as you've rightly said, we await the updates of what happens, you know, what happens with all of this, because he has literally been in the news, I believe, from Friday back to back. So, yeah, more on that. And we hope to update you here on Arise as we usually do. Now, going to the international news, we have the Winter Olympics, which has been taking center stage in the British papers. Tabitha Stoker, Matt Weston, they won the mixed team skeleton, their second gold for the day. I believe we also have an African story here. We have the Daily Graphic straight out of Ghana. Front page says, no more foreign funds for cocoa, says President Mahama. The government has decided to stop foreign funding for cocoa purchases and are instead opting for domestic funds to buy the crop. Now, very interestingly, we have been seeing Ghana moving to localize major decisions in various industries. We saw a similar move in the mining sector as they clamped down on illegal mining activities. And we've been seeing this going on, I think, for the past year. So President Mahama has really been working hard to make sure that he brings all the pivotal decisions back into the hands of Ghanaians, and that's to be commended. And now the story that we're actually going to focus on in the international news is the case of corruption and money laundering in Ukraine. Now, a former Ukrainian energy minister has been detained while allegedly trying to leave the country as part of a major corruption scandal in the country. Now, anti-graft authorities say the arrest is linked to a $100 million embezzlement scheme in Ukraine's energy sector, also involving money laundering. Benga, wow. What is it about the energy sector that is so attractive in, you know, bringing in all this money laundering controversies and fraud globally? I mean, we have seen so many countries where energy resources, the management is highly porous, you know, when it comes to this, and there's so much foul play. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, you know that when you look at the global scheme as of today, the energy resources, whether the renewables, whether the orthodox scheme, they determine any nation's strength. The richest countries in the world are being graded are being influenced by access to this energy resource. So now, looking at the case of Galushchenko, the former energy leader, energy minister rather, it was caught in the train, and it was believed to be trying to escape because he was exiting the state's border. And now, if you look at some of the allegations, that's about 10 to 15% kickback of that energy contract, which is against, which is a serious violation of the law. And again, Ukraine finds itself in a very peculiar situation in which addressing such corruption case would be a deal enabler for it to join the EU properly, fully. And also, you look at a situation where even the beginning of the Russian invasion, that was one of the campaign, that was one of the propaganda the Russian government used in penetrating and invading invasion of Ukraine in 2022 with a promise to investigate this scandal. So a lot of stake for Vladimir Shevchenko, and unfortunately for him, even under his nose, his chief of staff was also involved in this case.
Oh yes.
So it's so interesting, and we'll see what comes in the coming days.
Thank you so much, Benga. It was very interesting taking
Indeed,
those
so
headlines
delightful.
with you this morning. And